The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? Wednesday, February 8th. Hey, Jonathan, it's nice to have you here. Anonymous user, thank you for the support. It's appreciated. So I don't usually, I almost never watch State of the Union addresses. I find them boring and stupid and uninformative. And, you know, I a few times, I think for Obama and then maybe once for Trump, I tweeted the State of the Union address, kind of as I was listening, I was tweeting about it. So that was kind of fun. I got to complain about everything they were saying. But I had no intention of watching last night. I mean, Biden is a boring speaker. And again, State of the Union is boring, uninteresting, and they mean nothing, and they indicate nothing. Boy, was I wrong. God, I mean, I've only watched a few clips, but based on the few clips that I saw, that was a raucous, entertaining event. I mean, wow, the Republicans yelled at Biden. Biden, you know, yelled back at them. Kevin McCarthy sitting in the back there, stone-faced, shaking his head. It was quite something. And I have to say, based on at least in one exchange, it is clear that Biden got the upper hand on the Republicans in a clever way that kind of caught them at their own contradiction, which was perfect and shows how pathetic and how inconsistent and how ridiculous the Republicans are. So there's a section in the speech where he says, the Republicans here who want to phase out or something like that, phase out Social Security and Medicare. And the Republicans all said, no, we don't want to do that. You're crazy. We don't want to do that. That's a lie. You're lying. What are you saying? And they have a little bit of exchange, and Biden says, hey, I can send you your own proposals. You're making these proposals. And they're saying, no, we don't want to do that. And he says, okay, so can we agree that whatever we negotiate in the future, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. Whatever negotiations we have in the future, that no cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and all the Democrats stand up and give you a standing ovation, and then Republicans realize that they better stand up too, because otherwise they'll be perceived as not supporting no cuts to Social Security and Medicare. So almost all the Republicans stand up and giving a standing ovation. Busted right, Rob. I mean, the Republicans gave him a standing ovation over no cuts to Social Security and Medicare because they were caught in a contradiction. They couldn't appear to the American people as appearing to be God. Perfect. So everything about the speech was terrible in terms of the content, but I did find him getting and cornering the Republicans quite entertaining and very effective. It was the best I've seen Biden ever, maybe his best moment ever, certainly in the speech, was when he got them. But yes, he promised the usual, we'll tax billionaires, we'll cap drug company, we'll go after prescription drugs, we'll do price controls, we'll redistribute wealth, we'll fix the world, we'll we'll give government more and more power, and we'll raise taxes on the wealthy. And of course, we won't touch Social Security and Medicare. And everybody will get their fair share, right? Ike says he called himself a capitalist during the speech. That doesn't surprise me. Elizabeth Warren calls herself a capitalist. So nobody's against capitalism. I mean, maybe Bernie is, but nobody's against capitalism because nobody will define capitalism. And the people who actually support capitalism or claim to support capitalism won't define it. And Republicans don't want to define it because they don't want to pretend that Social Security and Medicare are inconsistent with capitalism. They want to be pro-capitalist and pro-Social Security and Medicare. So if Republicans won't define capitalism, then why isn't Joe Biden a capitalist? He's just a little bit to the left of Republicans on economic policy. If they're capitalist, he's a capitalist too. So it's, God, this is why I don't watch it, because it just irritates me and makes me angry and is super stupid. And it doesn't matter one way or the other. You know, he is the guy who's fighting inflation. He's going to reduce the deficit. He is going to build America back. We're heavily investing in infrastructure. We're bringing chip manufacturing back home. I know exactly. I mean, I could have told you a month ago what he was going to say. I mean, the big thing he probably emphasized yesterday was jobs, 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 because the numbers came out a few days before. Owned by America. And if you take his speech and compare it to Trump's speech, is it that different? In style, obviously. But in terms of content, Buy America, that was both. Hate China, that's both. Jobs, 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 that's both. Yeah, Biden's more boring. Although yesterday, I mean, because of the Republicans. I mean, that's the other thing. Is this used to be kind of a dignified speech, and everybody would sit there and then you remember when maybe you don't remember because you're too young, but Obama gave a State of the Union speech, and a Republican yelled out in the middle of the speech, "Liar!" I think it was about Obamacare, and he yelled out, "Liar!" And he was fined, and he was, and he was ridiculed, and it was a big deal out of it. Yesterday, the Republicans interrupted the speech constantly. They yelled out all kinds of things. Not one of them is going to be ridiculed. No, not one of them is. I mean, the dignity of the speech is gone. The content was never there. I, for one, am going to add my vote to the many votes out there who argue that this should be abandoned. As Andrew says, standing ovation from both sides, not only on not touching Medicare and Social Security, but standing ovation on both sides on blaming big tech for whatever troubles we have. Unbelievable. So yes, we are more and more of a statist nation. There's less and less and less anybody advocating for actually any kind of freedom, particularly not, well, any kind of freedom, because blaming big tech is also an attack on their free speech. So it's basically less freedom is the one thing that unites Republicans and Democrats. We want less freedom. We just wanted different measures in different places, to different extents in different areas. But basically, we're all united about less freedom. And there used to be a segment within the Republican Party that advocated for freedom, but that seemed to shrink and shrink and shrink. I mean, there's even the Freedom Caucus in the House, and they've stopped being for freedom. All delivery at State of the Union addresses is boring and awful. Yelling is never appropriate in the middle of somebody else's speech. If you have a pretense of dignity, and there is no dignity anymore in our politics. We're like the British House of Commons, or like the Israeli Knesset, or whatever. That old American dignity in the House of Representatives and respect for a president, that's gone. It's finished. Yeah, I think it ended with Obama, and now it's completely buried. And Republicans used to be the ones who insisted tradition, dignity, conserve. They're the worst offenders now. All right. So one of the proposals, of course, that Biden put together was that he wants to, these evil corporations are using their money to buy back stock instead of investing it in their own businesses and hiring more people and raising wages and creating more jobs and creating more business activity and raising GDP or whatever. They're doing stock buybacks, and therefore Biden already in the tax plan that already passed has established a very small tax on stock buybacks. And last night he predictably recommended that stock buybacks be taxed at a rate of 4 times more, I think 4 times more. Because stock buybacks are evil. Again, a point that I'm sure the Republicans did yell at him on this one, because a point that Trump agreed and many people agree that stock buybacks are terrible and we need to shrink them and we need to minimize them. And therefore, why not just tax them? And either that will incentivize businesses to keep the cash and invest it and grow the economy and do good things. Now, this is so ignorant on so many different levels. But I've talked about this before, so I've given you my view of stock buybacks before. Oops, I don't see my stock buyback article has disappeared. Wait a second. So I'm going to give you a brief outline of why stock buybacks are good, why they do not manipulate stock prices, why they are an excellent efficiency enhancing tool that should actually exist. And the one thing they don't do is manipulate stocks. People can say that and argue that, but zero actually negative evidence. The evidence suggests the exact opposite with regard to stocks. All right, so I am. It's infuriating because I had it and it's gone. There it is. All right. So what do people claim about stock buybacks? They claim that that this is cash that the company could use for other things. But indeed, the whole point of a stock buyback is to take cash that the company cannot get a decent rate of return on, cannot invest. Why? Because companies that do stock buybacks are typically mature companies. They face shrinking investment opportunities. They do not face any opportunities to make significant money on their investments. In finance terms, the investment profile that they face is a negative net present value investments. Therefore, what you want is for these companies to get rid of this cash. What you want is for these companies to give this cash to people who might have good investment opportunities with it. So stock buybacks are just another way for companies to return cash to investors. It's like a dividend. It's a fancy way to do it in the sense that it's tax efficient. It's tax efficient because the investors who cash out are getting capital gains, and capital gains is taxed at a lower rate than dividends are. So if you pay out a dividend, the investors ultimately pay a higher tax on it. So investors, shareholders, prefer to get a stock buyback. But the idea, so stock buybacks are just a way to get cash back to investors. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing, because you don't want companies holding cash when they don't have good investment opportunities. Indeed, I view cash buybacks as a positive sign because it indicates responsible managers. It indicates that managers are not going to just sit on cash. They're actually going to give it back to owners so that the owner can then take that cash and invest it somewhere else in the economy where they can get a higher return on it. And of course, sometimes companies take on debt in order to pay back stock, and that because interest on debt is tax deductible at the corporate level, and they can arbitrage. It's a tax arbitrage. They get a benefit on the tax side from the debt. They pay it out to shareholders. Shareholders are benefiting because they get cash in return and they get it as capital gains, and everybody benefits. So almost all stock buybacks are from free cash, not from debt, from actual cash that's sitting on the book. So, and this is the tax code. The tax code generally favors companies taking on debt and reducing the amount of equity they have. Why? Because interest on debt is deductible. Dividends are not deductible. When you pay out a dividend, you don't tax deduct that. When you buy back a stock, there's no tax deduction. So you get the tax deduction. You create a tax deduction by taking on the debt and using it to do the stock buyback. Now, why are stock buybacks not stock manipulation. Because the fact is that the buyback actually reduces the value of the company. And by reducing the value of the company, even though there are now fewer shares, so, I mean, this is the thinking, right? The company buys back shares, so now there's fewer shares, the company's the same, so those fewer shares are worth more. But that's not true. The company is worth less. Why is it worth less? Because when I value a company, I'm valuing the fact that they have, let's say, $10 billion in cash. And they could invest that, and they could get a return on that, and that goes into my calculation of what the stock is worth. When that 10 billion is gone, poof, disappears, then what happens? Then the value of the company has gone down. And if the value of the company has gone down, then the value of the company divided by the number of shares, it turns out, actually stays the same. And again, empirical study after empirical study shows that this is indeed the case. Stock buybacks do not increase the value of a company. Now, you say supply and demand, but that's not true either. Because yes, the supply of stock has decreased, but so has the demand. Now, why would the demand decrease? The demand has decreased because the company is worth less. Because it's just, instead of having, you know, if I have $10 million on my balance sheet, and then I give them to you, how much is my balance sheet worth? It's worth $10 million less than what it was yesterday. So by buying back their stock, and that stock is burned, it's not like they hold that stock and that stock is an asset. That stock is gone. By buying back their stock, they've actually decreased the value of their own company, which is legitimate and the right thing to do because they're giving the money back to the owners. But demand would go down because, so supply goes down, demand goes down, and the price stays the same. Indeed, if you look at companies that buy back their stock versus companies that don't buy back their stock, they tend to underperform. They don't tend to overperform. Now, there are all kind of nuances here. Right? So I like companies that buy back their stocks, everything else else constant, because it shows management to be responsible. I don't like companies that don't buy back their stocks and sit on lots of cash because then they're not responsible. Edward says, but shareholders are upper-level executives. Really? Where do you live? Where do you guys live and have opinions about things? You look at upper-level executives and how much shares they own in the companies that they manage. Very few. How much does the CEO own of Apple? Almost nothing. How much does all the management team at Apple own of Apple stock? Almost nothing. Almost zero. That's a problem. I wish they own more. And are they selling? Is the stock buyback buying from management? No, because management are not allowed to sell whenever they want to. Management can only sell at certain periods of time. And only said, you know, and it's very limited in terms of what you can buy and what you can sell and buy in your own company. The SEC regulates that in unbelievable ways. Stock buybacks are good, an unbelievable positive. There's absolutely zero wrong with them. There are lots of good things about them. All that would happen if you ban stock buybacks or if you tax stock buybacks is companies will pay more dividends. They'll pay higher dividends. And there's no difference between the two. You can argue dividends are stock manipulation. You give people a dividend. More people want to own it. So demand goes up, stock price goes up. That's just silly. So, no, sorry. And I've done research on this. I've actually run numbers on this. I was a finance professor in a previous life, and stock buybacks at best signal to investors that managers are responsible, are dealing with their money responsibly, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. All right, let's see. Yeah, tech layoffs. I was reading a story about the latest tech layoff was Zoom. Zoom, what happened here? Sorry, there it is. My files are not in the place that I put them. Okay, Zoom is cutting 1,300 jobs. The CEO is taking a 98% pay cut. And the company also said its executive leadership team is reducing their base salary by 20%. So big layoffs. We've seen Dell. We've seen it across the entire tech sector. Layoffs after layoffs after layoffs, which is of course interesting. It turns out that the people being laid off are getting nice severance packages, and almost all of them are getting almost immediately other job offers. These at least the programs among them. So there are 3 types of people being laid off in most of these layoffs, and at least 2 of them I think you'll be happy with. I certainly was happy to hear that they're being laid off. So who's being laid off? Well, programmers are being laid off. A lot of programmers. But unsurprising, programmers who are being laid off are finding job opportunities almost immediately. Maybe not at the same salary, maybe, but they're certainly finding other job opportunities. So there is no, their income is not, and their wealth is not going to be hurt that much by the fact that they are being laid off. So on average, about 22% of, computer scientists are being laid off. So some of the top echelon at these companies, are being laid off. Indeed, a lot of companies are saying they're going to hire junior programmers, and they're laying off very senior people. And I think this is cost cutting. The computer scientists over the last few years, the people that are really at the top of their profession, were making huge amounts of money, and I guess companies decided it just wasn't worth it. So you are seeing those people laid off, and companies going to hire in the future lower skilled, at least in the beginning. Second group to be cut, to be laid off, is HR people. HR people. Actually, more people in HR being laid off than are on the technology side, on the programming side. So, and this is broadly, this isn't Zoom, this is broadly throughout the industry. It looks like 28% of the layoffs were from HR segments. A lot of these, and you'll be really happy to hear about this, a lot of these are ESG people who are focused on, environment, society, and governance. And a large number of them are DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion people. They're getting rid of the dead wood. It looks like social responsibility programs are being cut significantly in tech companies. Right? And good. Maybe they shouldn't have hired them to begin with, and maybe they won't hire them in the future. Again, it's not going away. They're just shrinking those divisions. They're laying off people. They're shrinking them. Again, there is a certain possibility that people are realizing that maybe this is not additive. This is not value additive. So HR is shrinking significantly. Within HR, most of the firings are in the ESG, DEI parts of HR. Good riddance. This is wonderful news. This will actually increase productivity in the business and in the industry, and in America. Thumbs up to tech industry for getting rid of the deadwood. All right, let's see. So that is there. All right, we are way behind on the Super Chat today. So just remember, you can ask me questions. I think I've only got 3 questions so far. You can ask me questions using the Super Chat about anything pretty much, news or unnews related. You can also just support the show through the Super Chat. $2 by everybody who's listening right now would get us to where we need to be, or $3 probably would get us to where we need to be. So please think about supporting the show value for value. All right, a quick update on Ukraine and Iran. You know, I usually, my Ukraine updates are good news usually, signifying significant gains by the Ukrainians over the Russians. Well, unfortunately, the news right now coming out of Ukraine is fairly bad news. It's not devastating news, but it's not good news. The Russians are basically throwing massive numbers of bodies at the fight, primarily in the east, in Luhansk and Donetsk provinces. The Russians, as you know, have called up and conscripted a huge number of young recruits. Many of these people are badly trained, have minimal training, and they're throwing at the front lines. I mean, this is the old Soviet style, or the old, really, you could go back centuries. The Russian style of warfare. The Russian style of warfare is throw bodies at the problem. Throw huge numbers of bodies at the problem. And that's what they're doing right now in places like Bakhmut and to the north of it and to the south of it along the Donetsk province. Donbas province. And as a consequence, they are making gains. Small gains, but gains nonetheless. And the cost of those gains is massive. Thousands of Russians are being killed on a daily basis. And they still haven't captured Bakhmut. They've been trying to capture Bakhmut for at least 6 months. They have not yet succeeded in capturing Bakhmut. They've got most of it. They'll probably have it by the end of the week, maybe sometime next week. But the amount of casualties they are taking is just stunning and unbelievable. They're attacking the Ukrainians along a large front with hundreds of thousands of troops, and yet advancing very little. But it is brutal out there. Ukrainians are taking massive casualties, as are the Russians. My suspicion is the Russians are taking larger casualties. It's in that sense the party on the offense in this kind of slow, grinding, almost hand-to-hand combat is likely to suffer more casualties than the defenders. But it really is hard to tell. It is a brutal. What's going on right now across that front is reminiscent of kind of World War I type fighting. It is brutal. It is bloody. It is horrible. You have to feel for the soldiers on both sides of this, because certainly the Russian soldiers are not there because they want to be. Although they had a chance, some of them at least had a chance to escape and chose not to. Many escaped Russia in order to avoid this. But many of them are going to go back in bodyguards, and the next few weeks are going to be brutal. The Russians are intensifying their offensive. They will expand the offensive over the next few weeks, and right now they have the advantage in terms of just sheer numbers. And the Ukrainians don't have yet the number, enough of the weapon systems, advanced weapon system, to be able to combat their deficit, their numerical deficit. So it's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal, and we'll be watching closely. And as this develops, I will be updating you with time. But I have no doubt that as soon as the Ukrainians get more of the Western weapon systems that are being shipped to them as we speak, they will be able to overcome their numerical deficit quite easily and push back the Russians. And I still expect the Ukrainians to make significant advances over the Russians this year. All right. Iran, quick Iran update. A few things happening on the Iran front. One of them linked to Russia. One of the things that has happened is Iran over the last, since 1979 really, with on and off again sanctions on it, Iran has developed a very sophisticated mechanisms by which to evade the sanctions, in which to circumvent the sanctions, in which they manage to sell oil in spite of the fact that supposedly nobody's supposed to buy oil from them. they have a whole fleet of what are called ghost ships. These are ships that carry Iranian oil, sell Iranian oil, but are under a different flag, and you have fake papers and have fake, the oil is supposedly from somewhere else, and they perfected this idea of a black market in oil. They are now using those techniques to help Russia sell its oil, and the ghost fleet is only growing and increasing, and Russian oil is being sold on the black market in spite of all the sanctions. What is interesting, though, is that revenue from the oil, the Russian Finance Department announced, I think, a few days ago, revenue from oil in the last quarter of 2022 was 50% of what it was in the last quarter of 2021. So sanctions have cut revenue for oil for Russia by half. At the same time, government expenditure has gone through the roof because of expenditures on the war effort and on trying to keep the economy growing, which has resulted in a massive deficit, a massive unexpected Russian fiscal deficit. This is only going to get worse, not going to get better. I expect the Russian economy, in spite of the fact that they're supposedly showing positive GDP growth. Countries often show positive GDP growth during war because the government is spending a lot of money on building armaments, but that spending, while it adds to GDP, does not add to quality or standard of living. Quality and standard of living in Russia have plummeted and are going down and will get worse over 2023. This government deficit, when it's very difficult for the Russians to sell their bonds, it's only going to make things worse. It's only going to make things worse. I wouldn't be surprised if we got even more significant inflation than we have right now in Russia itself, and in ultimately affecting the value of their currency. All right, a few other quick stories about Iran. During all these protests, we had hoped that moderate voices within the regime would maybe try to overthrow the more radical voices, the more hardliners. Unfortunately, the opposite has happened. It looks like during the protests and during all this, the hardliners within the Iranian regime have actually increased their strength, increased their power, and actually have a more dominant position within the Iranian regime as they did before. Whether that is sustainable, whether this is their last gasp, probably one could hope, but unlikely. The hardliners seem to be solidifying their position within Iran right now. Their position has not weakened, but become stronger, at least within the ruling elite. One other Iranian-related story quickly, and that is increased tensions between Iran and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is in a country just north of Iran. It is one of the Caucasus, just south of Georgia, southeast of Georgia, and north of Iran. The Azaris actually constitute about a third of the Iranian population, so it's the same ethnic group. It's a Turkish ethnic group. They consider themselves genetically, they are from the same tribe as the Turks. The Azaris, though, have a secular government. They have a dictator, but they are secular, and for that reason, there's always been tension between Iran and Azerbaijan. Lately, the tension has intensified because the Iranians fear that the Azeris are working with the Israelis. I think a fear that is justified. They are a direct flight from Azerbaijan to Tel Aviv. I think Azerbaijan has just announced they're opening an embassy in Israel. Israel already has an embassy in Azerbaijan. I have been to Azerbaijan. I actually gave a talk on capitalism in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is a Muslim secular country ruled by an authoritarian, totalitarian family. It has a lot of oil, and actually was part of the Russian Empire in the 19th century, and it was the first place in which oil was discovered in Russia and was an important part of the Russian Empire. And Putin would love to get his hands on Azerbaijan, but probably won't, but would love to do it. Let's see. Anyway, tensions up there. You always wonder whether the Israelis There's a lot of Israel sells weapons to Azerbaijan. They sell drones to Azerbaijan. Indeed, when Azerbaijan beat the Armenians, they did a lot of it with Israeli-made drones, Turkish-made drones, and Israeli-made drones. So it is an interesting country. There was even rumors at some point that if Israel attacked the Iranian nuclear facilities, they would actually fly planes out of Azerbaijan to do that. Whether Azerbaijan would risk that, I don't know. But I think the Iranians are worried because Azerbaijan sits in a very strategic location in terms of Iran. It is very close to Iranian military and population centers, and they are very, very worried about an Israeli presence in Azerbaijan. There's no question there's an intelligence presence. The question is, how big is it, and how impactful is it on Israel's ability to act within Azerbaijan? All right, that is the quick news update for you guys. I was going to do another vaccine thing, but I think I'll do that. I'll probably do that tomorrow. All right, let's see. Michael asks, why has technology been able to outpace bad philosophy? We shouldn't be able to have skyscrapers and satellites and altruism and envy all in the same world. Why does philosophy have this lag time in catching up? Well, you know, it takes a long time. So the reality is that technology and skyscrapers and all the good that we have in the world today is also a result of philosophy. It's primarily a result of the Enlightenment. It's a result of the Enlightenment. It's a result of the philosophy of the founding fathers. It's a result of the sense of life of Americans that was basically formed and molded from the ideas of the Enlightenment, as manifest in the culture that became America, in the spirit that became America, and all of that is the Enlightenment. And the explicit philosophy of the intellectuals is constantly fighting that. It is constantly chipping away. In a sense, if you want to think about what we're trying to do, those of us fighting to preserve America, is we're fighting to preserve the Enlightenment. We're fighting to preserve those ideas that were founding of the country and that still influence all the positives in the culture in which we live. So that's, and why does it sustain itself? It sustains itself because it works. It sustains itself because it's practical. It sustains itself because people don't want to die and generally don't want to suffer. They might think that altruism is a wonderful thing, but they don't actually want to act altruistically. They don't actually want to suffer as individuals. And they might think that poverty is noble, but they don't want to be poor. So they latch onto the Enlightenment ideas, not because they accept them, not because they buy into them, but because it's the only way in which they can continue to survive and thrive existentially. But every time they're challenged, they can't really fight against it, so they get weaker and weaker and weaker, and we see the bad guys entrenching more and more and more into their lives. Also remember that Ayn Rand has had already a substantial and significant impact on the culture. Many entrepreneurs, many of those tech guys, read Atlas Shrugged, read The Fountainhead, and were inspired by them. They didn't become objectivists, but they were inspired by that philosophy. And that impacted their ability to be entrepreneurs and to create and to build and to do the things that they have done in creating all this, and by creating all this technology and by advancing the world. So don't minimize the role that Ayn Rand and good ideas have in the culture even today. But look, the Enlightenment is not just going to go away. It's going to continue to fight against the anti-Enlightenment ideas. You know, they basically have lost the fight in academia. They've lost the fight among intellectuals, but they haven't lost the fight yet among the common people. All right, Andrew says, standing ovation. Oh, yeah, I saw that. We talked about that. All right, Scott says, would Roark use ChatGPT to write a DEI statement? But Roark probably wouldn't build if a DEI statement was required. He'd find a place to work where a DEI statement was not required. He'd go to Query. I doubt the Query requires DEI statements. Nadav asks, thoughts on Israeli government doing away with judicial review? I think it's a disaster. I mean, Israel is a significantly flawed political system because it has no constitution. It has no clear-cut, clear separation of powers and clear judicial protection of judicial review under a constitution. Israel needs a constitution. It needs a secular constitution that establishes a proper role for the judiciary, a proper role for judges. But as long as it doesn't have a constitution, it is a real challenge for Israel to preserve the judiciary's independence. And the judiciary is manipulated. And what Netanyahu is trying to do is trying to use the tools that he has, because there is no constitution, to reduce the power of the judiciary and increase his power. Netanyahu is always and everywhere all about power, all about his power. Of course, if he does this, and the left ever gets into power in Israel, the left will control the judiciary. And then he won't be happy. I mean, this is the problem with the right saying, oh, we'll take over and we'll give government the power to do all these things, but we'll do them for a good cause. But what happens when the other side, I mean, assuming your cause is good, and it's not. But even if it was, what happens when the other side wins? And then they use it. Now you've given them even more tools to take over the world. But, you know, that actually means that you expect people to think long term, which I shouldn't. Colt, thank you. Danny, thank you. Mel, thank you. Valdemir, thank you. We are, way behind. Maybe somebody can come in and get us to our target here quickly, easily. If not, but that would be nice. If everybody did $2, we'd make the target. So those of you who haven't yet provided value for value, you can do so with the sticker and get us to where we need to be. But otherwise, we will be where we are. Bash Vanagan. Do those companies who do stock buybacks use your arguments in favor of them? And if not, why not? How do they argue in favor of them? I don't know that they argue in favor of them at all. I don't know that they do anything, unfortunately. Business is very rare that it argues for itself. They argue that this is good for shareholders and it's good for the owners, and which is all true. But what they don't want to say is we don't really have any good uses for this cash, so we might as well give it to our shareholders so that they can invest it better than what we can do. They don't want to admit that, but that's exactly what they're saying by doing the cash buyback. And I think it would be better if they actually said it. If they said something like, the investment opportunity set that we face right now provides fewer opportunities than what we believe our shareholders face, and therefore we are returning their money to the shareholders so that they can then invest on their own behalf. I think that would be a fine way to defend. In terms of the technicalities of why stocks don't actually go up as a consequence of share buybacks, finance professors talk about this all the time. We studied this when I took finance classes. I taught my students this. But it's like talking to a wall. Nobody wants to hear this stuff. Nobody actually wants to hear the truth. This is my point about vaccines as well. Nobody wants to hear the truth. They've got a theory. They've got a theory. It's a conspiracy theory, a big conspiracy theory of vaccines, a little conspiracy theory, stock buybacks. And facts and evidence and academic studies and data don't matter. Don't matter. They'll always find a little piece of sub-data. They won't even make it up. They'll find real data to justify what they want to believe to begin with. Martin Anderson. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate the support. What do you think about doing more shows with commentary on videos of popular people? I noticed your past shows about JP get many views. One suggestion would be Lex Clip titled Destiny, the Case of Big Government. I'll look for that clip. Yeah, I'm happy to do those. I find them, I don't know. I mean, I find it difficult to find good clips. Usually, like Lex, it's too long and I can't listen to the whole thing to find clips. And then sometimes people send me clips and I guess I don't know what to say about it, or there's too much to say or too little to say. Or I think I'm going to do something from a clip of, what's his name? Zahar, the demographics geography guy. I've got something he did on Joe Rogan about the war in Russia that I think I have some intelligent things to say about that I think would be interesting. So I might use his clip next Tuesday. And I'll look at this one. But generally, if you guys see clips, short clips, 10 minutes, a clip of something you think would be interesting if I commented on, showed and commented while showing, then send it to me. I'm always considering those. I'm always looking for those, and happy to do them. All right, well, $150 short, guys. Tazy, I'm recovering from food poisoning right now. Hope Putin wasn't behind it. Well, you haven't said anything too nasty about Putin. I'm the one who got food poisoning. Pretty sure it was Putin behind it. All right. Yash Arya says, on H-1B, getting married soon, high expenses ahead, and in tech sector with the scare of layoffs, won't be able to support next few months. Best wishes. Understand completely. And yes, I mean, if you're on H-1B, the real danger is even if there are jobs out there, even if most people who are getting laid off, I think it's more than 80%, are getting a job offers immediately. The challenge with H-1B is you have to find an employer who's willing to sponsor you. It's not enough that they're willing to hire you. They need to willing to sponsor you, and many of them are not willing to sponsor. So it's going to be a lot tougher. So I understand completely. Appreciate the support. Appreciate any support you provide. Thank you. Robert Nasa, thank you, Robert. Yes, don't forget to become a member of the Iran Book channel. We will have our first, our February members only show. I expect it to be this Sunday. I'm kind of looking for a topic. If anybody has an idea for a topic for a members only show, let me know, but that will be probably this Sunday. I'm trying to do it in an hour that is available also to Europeans, so I didn't want to do it in the evening. So members only show probably on Sunday, looking for a topic. If you have any ideas, let me know. If Kantianism subtracted Christianity's heavenly motivations for altruism and actually subtracted any selfish motivation, how can and does altruism survive without a why? Because, first of all, yeah, I mean, it survives without a why because very few people ask why. The reality is most people don't ask why. And when they do ask why, the answer often is, well, what's the alternative? To be a scumbag? Most people don't want to be scumbags. And they can't conceive of the alternative. The alternative of being rationally self-interested is inconceivable to people. And even when presented to people, it's hard for them to retain it. It's hard for them to hold it. Because from everything from when we're little is geared towards inculcating within us a particular view of morality, a particular view of morality that is altruistic. And therefore, either you don't ask why, which is most people, or your why does come from religion, which is in America, is most people. Or if it doesn't come from God, it's, well, what's the alternative? And you know, the other alternative is, which on the left you see a lot, is they replace God with society, with the collective, with other people. And that's just fits right into altruism. So they place the collectivism first, and they become altruistic because it's good for the collective. And collectivism is the standard. And if you ask them why the collective, what else is there? Each one of us be selfish and nasty and horrible and cheat, lie, and steal from each other? That obviously is wrong. All right. Yes, don't forget to become a member. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're not a subscriber to the show, please subscribe. Don't forget to like before you leave. That helps with the algorithms. We've got double the people watching than have liked. And what else? If you want to support the show monthly, youronbookshow.com/support, Patreon, Subscribe Star, and so on. Thanks, everybody. Thanks all the super chatters. Gail is saying, I'm trying to get others to join your shows are pure gold. I appreciate that. Thank you, Gail. Really appreciate it. Mike, thank you for the support. So we're slowly chipping away at the deficit, but we're going to land up with a deficit because I'm going to call it a day. I'll see you all tomorrow morning, and tomorrow evening we are going to have an interview. I'll be interviewing Jason Crawford about progress. Why is progress stalled? Why don't we have as much progress as we used to have? Has progress stalled? Maybe that's fake news. And what do we have to do in order to revive economic, technological, scientific progress in America? Bye, everybody.